Welcome back to the channel. In today's video we are finally going over my themed Letterboxd for the month of March, which was sports. And first off, apologies for this being multiple weeks late. At this point, I recently, at my job, I've been working a lot of overtime, and so it's hard to find the time to record videos and edit, but I'm trying to get back into more of a routine, more of a rhythm, and so hopefully next month's, probably still go like a week or so into May for the next month's video, but hopefully after that we'll kind of reel it back in and actually start doing these at the beginning of the month like I'm supposed to be doing. But again, in today's video, we are just going over the results of watching all of these sports movies that I did in the month of March. And if you're new to this series, again, essentially all this is just at the beginning of each month I do kind of a preview video where I pick a theme, and then throughout that month I watch a bunch of films that fit that theme. And also in that preview video I kind of give you what my current Letterboxd for is, and then at the end we take a look at what the final Letterboxd for is, and we see if anything's kind of moved or changed in that ranking. So without further ado, let's take a look at the films that I watched this month, starting with the honorable mentions. And the first honorable mention is Love and Basketball. Since the film was used in February's Black History Month video, it wasn't eligible, but would have made the list. A romantic sports drama that had me hooked on both aspects. I was unfamiliar with Sanaa Lathan, but she delivers an excellent performance. 42. Based on the true story of one of the most important figures in the history of sports. The story of Jackie Robinson is a story that baseball fans and non-baseball fans alike can come together and appreciate. Quite possibly the first film I ever saw Chadwick Boseman in, and I miss him and the amazing performances he still had to give. Caddyshack. I wasn't too familiar with this film before seeing it, other than I knew it was regarded as one of the best sports movies and best comedies of all time by some. There are definitely some bits in the film that worked for me, but it wasn't as good as I hoped. Bill Murray, however, did deliver every second he was on screen. Cars. This is the first time I've seen Cars since I saw it in theaters, and I was surprised by how much I liked it. I remembered so many of the quotes, but the story was hazy to me. It's a very motivational story that had way more heart than I remembered. Cars 3. While I saw the first in theaters, I never saw either of the sequels. Lightning McQueen being on the verge of retirement felt too soon of a story arc for me in just the third film, but maybe that element works better if you've actually waited 11 years between films instead of mere days like me. While I still liked the film better than the second, I was pretty disappointed in the ending. By the way, I also watched Cars 2 for the first time as well, but I had no idea it was an international espionage spy film instead of a sports movie, so it didn't make the list. Miracle. Miracle is a sports drama featuring the no-nonsense coach that pushes all of his players to their limits. While he gets the results and Kurt Russell gives a good performance, I just wasn't fully bought into our characters and their stakes. If you're a hockey fan, and more specifically a hockey fan in the 80s, this is a film that you're naturally going to have a more emotional connection to than I did. Happy Gilmore. This is a film that I was always embarrassed to admit that I hadn't seen. It's a quotable comedy that I can easily see how it became a nostalgic favorite for so many people. While I didn't love it on the first watch as much as I was hoping, I'm excited to see if this is one that gets better the more I watch it. The Mighty Ducks. I didn't see this when I was a kid, but the film had such a cultural impact that I was familiar with it. While I can admit that it is a good film, I think it is a movie that you view more positively if you saw it as a kid and have those good memories with it. I'm not familiar with Emilio Estevez and his career, but I wasn't the biggest fan of his performance in this. Space Jam. One of my all-time favorite movies as a kid. Michael Jordan is solid in his role, and his supporting cast of Looney Tunes are entertaining as always. It's a good thing they never made a sequel, right? D2, The Mighty Ducks. While it essentially follows the majority of the beats of the first film, the sequel loses some of the magic from the first. The expanded cast of kids does create some fun dynamics. All of the hockey scenes in this franchise are well done, which is appreciated with some sports movies not executing their sports scenes very well. The Sandlot. I was a fan of The Sandlot well before I was even a baseball fan. There's so much fun to be had for non-baseball fans, but your love for the film grows as your love for the game grows. So many classic scenes in this film, and some of the best child performances. D3, The Mighty Ducks. After saying I wasn't the biggest fan of Emilio Estevez's performance in the first two films, it's crazy to say that this film suffers because he's not in it more. The majority of the kids still have great chemistry together, but the storylines didn't interest me. If you were a fan of the franchise as a kid, you'll probably still enjoy this one, but otherwise you're okay with just watching the original. Like Mike. I was a basketball fan long before I was a movie fan, so as a kid, this was the peak of cinema. This is the first time seeing this in 2 decades, and I was a little disappointed it didn't look as realistic as I remembered, but I still had a blast. The nostalgia from seeing all the old NBA players, plus a young Jesse Plemons and Brenda Song, is a fun experience. Cinderella Man. Russell Crowe delivers a very solid performance, but Paul Giamatti steals the show. Admittedly, I'm not a boxing fan at all, but there is something so cinematic about the sport. This has a great case for being one of the better made sports films of all time, but it just didn't connect with me to where I could say I love it. He Got Game. Again, as someone who was a basketball fan before a film fan, I knew the name Jesus Shuttlesworth well before I knew the name Spike Lee. I was excited to finally see Ray Allen's performance in this, but was a little let down by how flat he often was. Spike Lee's direction and Denzel Washington's lead performance definitely carried the weight of the film. Raging Bull. I'm sure at some point on my channel I'm going to do a Martin Scorsese ranked video, and I'm excited to see where this falls on a second watch. While I liked the film, it wasn't the boxing scenes as much as the drama outside of the ring that captivated me. Stop me if you've heard this before, but Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci deliver excellent performances in a Scorsese picture. So in the previous 2 months, in January and February's video, in the preview video I gave you 4 films, and what happened both times is one film was able to take over another film spot in that Letterboxd 4, and we get, kind of one substitution at the end. Here for the March video, this is the first time 2 new films are entering from watching them this month, are entering in that Letterboxd 4, which means 2 films have to drop out, so let's take a look at the dropouts. Challengers. This was the hardest cut of the video, and I had to really consider if I was letting recency bias sway me too much, which I ultimately decided I wasn't, because the film is that damn good. I still think it falls just a bit short of the other 4. However, I'm more likely to watch this over some of the other films that do make the Letterboxd 4 due to the fun nature and enjoyment this film brings me. Dodgeball, a true underdog story. While it isn't a perfect movie, this remains a top 3 quotable movie of all time for me. Vince Vaughn isn't an actor I particularly like all that much, but he is great in this role as the straight man. Ben Stiller also brings an amazing chaotic energy to the film that makes him a great antagonist. And without further ado, let's take a look at the Letterboxd 4 and see what 2 films have jumped in. The first film is I, Tonya. Competitive ice skater Tonya Harding rises amongst the ranks in the U.S. Figure Skating Championships, but her future in the sport is thrown into doubt when her ex-husband intervenes. Allison Janney won for Best Supporting Actress at the 2018 Academy Awards. The film was also nominated for Margot Robbie for Best Actress and for Best Editing. I, Tonya was released in 2017 and was directed by Craig Gillespie. The film stars Margot Robbie, Sebastian Stan, and Allison Janney. Now, it's been about a month and a half, I would say, since the preview video for this month, so I don't remember for sure, but I feel like I distinctly remember saying in the preview video that I, Tonya was the film that I was most excited to give a rewatch to, just because I haven't seen it since I think I saw it in theaters, and maybe I watched it one more time on Redbox, like a couple weeks, later or so, maybe a couple months later, but it has been since, 2017, I feel like, since I've seen this film, so I was really excited for a rewatch. Partially because, not necessarily because, I'm more familiar with the story or anything, but I think I'm more familiar with, the actors, and I'm more familiar with the director, and I'm more familiar with, so much else that's just going on with this film to where I just felt like now I think I would have a better experience than I did back then. And that's not to say that I didn't have a good experience back then. I remember really liking the film back then, but I really loved it on this rewatch. Obviously, this is a film that I think a lot of it, there's 2 things that I think you give a lot of credit to for this film and what works, and one is obviously the acting. Obviously, you talk about Margot Robbie, and then Allison Janney won an Oscar for her role. They're both great as kind of this mother-daughter combo that is, at times there are kind of these sweet moments, but for the most part it is a very tense and very uncomfortable relationship that they have. Sebastian Stan is kind of the dumb boyfriend slash husband that, at times you're kind of questioning if he's just dumb or if he's just a really violent person or what's kind of going on with them. But then you've got Paul Walter Hauser is just kind of the bumbling idiot. He's phenomenal. I forgot that McKenna Grace, obviously she's only in it for a couple minutes, but she's just amazing in everything she's in. The big fan of McKenna Grace, and so there's just so many other, and then there's a lot of the supporting actors in this film that off the top of my head, I don't know their names, but everyone else, there's just so many great performances, very solid. So the performances obviously is one thing that is very good about this film, and one thing that works. The other thing that works really well for me is the direction, and it's the style of this film. Telling a story like this where you go into the film, and the film knows that you know the story, so they're not going to break this up into some sort of thing of here's the big reveal or the big moment at the end where they break Nancy Kerrigan's leg. We know what's happening, and so they kind of are playing with that. They're kind of playing with this kind of mockumentary or this kind of documentary style filmmaking where they're kind of being a little tongue-in-cheek, and you can tell that obviously it's unreliable narrators at times depending on who is telling the story and what's happening on screen, and so there's a lot of this kind of fun, chaotic energy to it, and then it kind of gets to the end and you've kind of been gone through this ride of kind of this fun comedy that's, I guess at times funnier than it should be, but then you kind of get to the end and you realize that this is just a real sad and tragic situation, just a very unfortunate situation. For essentially just about everyone involved, obviously Nancy Kerrigan specifically, but for everyone just kind of involved in this mess, in this relationship, the way that everything that this relationship touched was just for the worse. And so it's a story that is just kind of I'm just always impressed with films or with stories in general where if they're telling you a kind of well-known story, if they're able to deliver it in a fun and creative way like this is, it's something that just works really well for me. The next film is The Iron Claw. The true story of the inseparable Von Erich brothers, who made history in the intensely competitive world of professional wrestling in the early 1980s. Through tragedy and triumph, under the shadow of their domineering father and coach, the brothers seek larger-than-life immortality on the biggest stage in sports. The Iron Claw was released in 2023 and was directed by Sean Durkin. The film stars Zac Efron, Jeremy Allen White, and Harris Dickinson. Now, there's kind of a trend that you might notice in what ended up being my kind of final four picks here for sports films, and I think it's, as someone who is a sports fan, feel good sports, like your Miracle, for example, the feel good kind of sports movies, they're okay and they work for what they are, and then you get a lot of sports movies that are just kind of the family fun sports movies or maybe the comedies and stuff, and they work for what they are. But one thing I've noticed when I look at this final four here of what made my Letterboxd 4 is I clearly love the drama and tragedy and pain like in these sports movies. Like, I love these movies that are just so dramatic that's like the drama is what makes the sports scenes better, is because of like the absolute just kind of the tragedy that's happening. And this is the best example. If you haven't seen The Iron Claw, it's kind of a hard film to recommend because it is very heartbreaking at times. Often, especially as the film goes on, there's a lot of tragedy and there's a lot of real pain that is happening here with our characters, to where it's not a fun experience. It's not an enjoyable experience. At least, the first half you can kind of have your fun and you bond with this family, but as the film goes on what makes it worse is knowing that it's, a true story. The true story of watching what happens with this family. It is tragic. It is very hard to watch, but it's done so well and it works so well emotionally for me. Both times that because yeah, this is only the second time I've seen this, because I saw it in theaters and I thought it was great. And I've got a couple buddies that like I'll often go to see movies by myself, and then the next weekend or whatever I'll try and drag a buddy if I thought the movie was really good. And this is one that I thought was really good. I couldn't bring myself to seeing it again that quick. And this is coming from someone who, again, just watches so many movies and watches sad and tragic movies, and I'm usually pretty okay. I can kind of, I can watch something horrific and then watch it again the next day or whatever. It wouldn't really affect me. This was one where I really had to have some space and kind of sit with this. The Iron Claw was, the first time I saw this, it really wrecked me, especially the last, I want to say it's the last 15-ish minutes or so. You get kind of the final scene of like Jeremy Allen White, the kind of the meeting he has, and then the next scene with Zac Efron, and those two moments back to back, just they wreck me. And seeing this again for the first time in, I guess it's been a year and a half since it came out in theaters. Seeing this for the first time in a year and a half, I thought I was better prepared. I thought I was going to be okay to handle it a little bit more. I was a mess. I was a wreck. The ending of this film is so touching and so painful and beautiful, and bringing all of those emotions together, it makes this again, not an enjoyable film for me, but one that is just so powerful and one that I appreciate and I love so much for that reason. And again, you talk about the performances. Obviously, I talk about Jeremy Allen White and Zac Efron in the final kind of scenes, but it's all of the brothers, all four of the brothers. Lily James is excellent, and she doesn't have a whole lot of scenes. Holt McCallany, he's phenomenal as the father, coach, sometimes, kind of like the kid's hero, sometimes the villain, the antagonist, the very polarizing family dynamic that's happening here, where it's tensions in the family are all over the place, and it's from scene to scene. It's you don't know exactly what you're feeling or who you're kind of, and not rooting for, but just kind of like who you're supporting or who you're like whose side you're on in any given kind of moment in any given scene. And so there's just all of the acting is phenomenal in this, and this is one of those that for Sean Durkin, again, I'm outside of this, I don't know anything else that he's directed, but he is a director that when he his next film, I want to say there's another film of his that's announced. I'm just not thinking of it off the top of my head, but anything that he makes moving forward, he did such a phenomenal job with this that I'll watch anything he makes just because the Iron Claw is that phenomenal. The next film is Million Dollar Baby. Despondent over a painful estrangement from his daughter, trainer Frankie Dunn isn't prepared for boxer Maggie Fitzgerald to enter his life, but Maggie's determined to go pro and to convince Dunn and his cohort to help her. The film won for Best Picture, Best Director for Clint Eastwood, Best Actress for Hilary Swank, and Best Supporting Actor for Morgan Freeman. It was also nominated for Best Actor for Clint Eastwood, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Editing. Million Dollar Baby was released in 2004 and was directed by Clint Eastwood. The film stars Clint Eastwood, Hilary Swank, and Morgan Freeman. So Million Dollar Baby was a film that I actually hadn't seen before in my life, and then I saw it in, I guess it would have been November last year for the first time. I watched it the day before I went and saw Juror Number 2, Clint Eastwood's new film, and so I was going back and kind of catching up with his filmography, and it saw Million Dollar Baby, and I remember like really liking it then. I've said this before on the channel. I actually tried when I watched this for the first time. I tried watching like recording and doing like a reaction to it, but ultimately it's just I didn't quite have all of the everything needed in order to quite make a reaction video, so I didn't ended up posting that video. But I because of that experience of trying to do a reaction video while watching this for the first time, I remember it so vividly that I was a mess. Like I was. It's one of those that, again, this is a film that I knew the twist, or I kind of knew the thing that happens right at the end of the second act going into the third act. But the thing is, that moment, that scene, I thought that was the end. I thought that was kind of the twist ending, and then I thought it kind of just ended there. I didn't realize there was a whole third act following that moment, kind of the twist in this film. And watching this for the first time, I was just a mess for that third act. I was watching it and I was enjoying the film and I was getting everything the first couple acts, and then just that third act, I was on the edge of, or like on the edge of crying, and then full on bawling at points. Like it was just, I was that emotional with where that third act goes. Watching it again the second time a couple months later, I was emotional the whole movie, seeing everything that's kind of being set up in those first two acts and understanding where the film is going. Everything was that much more kind of personal and tender and like emotional to me, where it was just, again, the entire film I was emotional. And obviously once you get to that third act of the film, it's hard to really kind of keep your composure. And again, this is, you see here, this is now two in a row that are really sports, a wrestling film and a boxing film, that are just very tragic and painful. And again, I'm just noticing that this is the thing, because you can even consider, like Tonya isn't some feel good. Like obviously it ends very tragically as well. So far we're 3 for 3 on kind of the films that I like here, where I don't necessarily always love the go team sports movie, where it's just like everything's kind of all fine and happy at the end. And I guess I should say I do like those. There are some of those films that I do like, but in order for me to like love it, it's the stakes, it's the drama, it's the tension that comes into these films. And so far these three, and Million Dollar Baby especially, they just absolutely, they execute on that very well. And so it just creates a film going experience for me that is just very emotional and very impactful. Now, Million Dollar Baby, again, we're talking about in all of these, the acting is obviously phenomenal, and you can tell here with multiple Oscar nominations and some wins here for the acting in this film, that obviously Hilary Swank, Morgan Freeman, Clint Eastwood, they're all excellent. And this is one for me that Clint Eastwood is someone that I guess I'm just not super familiar with him as an actor. I haven't seen a lot of his acting. And so I didn't know if he was an actor that I felt like had the chops to like make me emotional. And watching this, absolutely, I was just blown away by how great Clint Eastwood is as an actor in this, because I know of him a little bit better as a director, and I know he's got the juice and he can direct. But seeing him, especially in that third act, realizing like I just always thought of him as just this grumpy old man, but all of a sudden I realized that he can play that while also still bringing a lot of heart to the film, which he does here. So all of it is, the acting is phenomenal. Even, like Jay Baruchel and Ricky Lindholm and Margot Martindale. Like there's so many people in this film that. Oh, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Captain America. Anthony Mackie. I completely just drew a blank on Anthony Mackie's name. There's so many great acting performances in this film, and it all just comes together excellently. And a lot of that is just because of Clint Eastwood's direction. And again, I mentioned that I'm more familiar with Clint Eastwood as a director because I just think he's a great director. He would be another fun director to do like a director ranked video on, because I think he's a great director, and he does an excellent job in this. So many of the way specifically the way he gets shots, like uses like kind of dark and unlit rooms, or like the scene where they're driving, the very little light kind of coming through the windows, and then there's the scene of him kind of just in his room, where it's like the light is coming through the door, and that's kind of all the light in the scene. He does just an excellent job of the direction and kind of the way that he envisions these scenes to create the emotion, to set it up, even before like the script and the performances are coming in. He just does an excellent job of kind of setting that emotion. And so this is just a film where every aspect is just working so well. The editing, the cinematography, the kind of the score. It's there's a little bit of a score in the film, and especially kind of toward the end, where it's almost like not really a whole lot of score as much as it is just kind of quiet and reserved moments for kind of the tragic ending. There is just so much about this film that, again, I know some people don't necessarily love this. It's not a lot of people's like one of their favorite like best picture winners ever, but for me, as a sports fan, again, someone not a big boxing fan, but just in this specific film, just there's something again so cinematic about it, and Million Dollar Baby specifically is just an excellent film. The final film is Moneyball. The story of Oakland Athletics general manager Billy Beane's successful attempt to put together a baseball team on a budget by employing computer-generated analysis to draft his players. The film was nominated for Best Picture, Best Actor for Brad Pitt, Best Supporting Actor for Jonah Hill, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Editing, and Best Sound Mixing. Moneyball was released in 2011 and was directed by Bennett Miller. The film stars Brad Pitt, Jonah Hill, and Philip Seymour Hoffman. And if you're familiar with the channel at all, I think this was the easiest, like you knew this was a lock, because, again, this is in my just real Letterboxd 4. This is, I have a series on my channel, Finding My Letterboxd 4. I'll put a link to the Moneyball video in the description here, because that was an episode where I had kind of established my current Letterboxd 4, and then I was watching just different movies to see if anything could crack in, and Moneyball took one of the film's spots. Like, it came in and took a spot, because I just truly love Moneyball. And I think this is one of those where you can look at it and you can say, depending on how you view Moneyball, 4 for 4 with my favorite sports movies not necessarily having like the happiest endings, or like certainly you can look at it in the sense of the hero or the main character, they didn't win in any of these, right? Like this is 0 for 4 where it's like the protagonist didn't win. And Moneyball especially, because the whole thing, especially where you get Billy Beane, his whole thing is he wants to win championships. If you don't, it doesn't matter like when you lose or when you're eliminated. If you're not the team lifting the pennant or lifting the World Series trophy at the end of the year, you lost. You're a loser. You didn't win, and that is his mindset. And so it's all, this whole thing is just about winning the last game of the season, and that is his goal, and that is his objective. And this is one of those films where I think if you're not a sports fan or not like a baseball fan specifically, and like you didn't know this team didn't win, if you were just watching this, everything is leading to you to believe that this team is just going to go on a run and is going to win the championship and is going to, bring a World Series to Oakland on a very tiny payroll. That is like the way that the film is making you feel, because that's just kind of how like a Hollywood film is just going by the beats and it's hitting these marks, and you're like, yeah, this is the momentum, this is where we're going. Instead, you kind of get to the end and it kind of gets you this abrupt ending. They lose in the postseason again, and you get kind of this last 15, 20 minutes or so of the film at the end. And it's this thing of, where you got Billy Bean, you got Brad Pitt's character, and he's kind of examining, he's kind of upset, and you've got just the one of the best scenes ever with Jonah Hill's Peter Brand, where he's kind of showing him the highlights of the guy that hit the home run but didn't know, and he was going for it, rounded first and fell, and everyone's laughing at him, and he doesn't realize that he hit a home run, and just a beautiful emotional moment. And how can you not be romantic about baseball? Just an excellent, beautiful, beautiful scene. And it's one of those that it just makes you realize you're watching this film and you're like, yeah, they didn't win, but Billy Bean found his love for baseball again. So much of this film is about him feeling like a failure, and again, the notion of you don't win that last game, you're a loser. And now all of a sudden he's realizing he's falling back in love with the game of baseball again. He's becoming romantic with baseball and understanding, yeah, he still wants to win, and that's obviously his whole thing, is he still wants to win a championship, but he can love the game and not feel like he's just the ultimate failure because he's didn't make it as a player and isn't winning, every single championship with this minuscule payroll that they have in Oakland. And the film kind of ends with him meeting with the position, having the opportunity to become the GM for the Red Sox. He ends up staying in Oakland because he just again fell in love with baseball again in Oakland with this group of guys, with this Moneyball system. And it's just one of those that when you get to that end of how can you not be romantic about baseball, it's such a beautiful kind of bow to this film that again isn't necessarily the happiest of ending, but I would say of these four is probably the best ending. And then you get the real kind of final scene of him with his daughter again, and you realize again he's spending more time with his family, spending more time with his daughter, and like getting the whole thing of it just feels like he's a happier person, like things are turning around, like he's not as miserable as he kind of was at the beginning of the film, and so just laser focused on hating baseball. He becomes more romantic about baseball, becomes more romantic about kind of everything in his life, and it is, I think, just kind of a beautiful, kind of touching ending to a film where, again, the team we're watching doesn't win, and spoiler alert, they don't really ever win. It's not like something that this happened and then you get a post-credit scene of 4 years later they finally got it. Instead, you get the post-credits, or the title card kind of saying that actually the Red Sox went on to use the Moneyball method. They ended up going on to win in a couple years later, and Oakland still looking, and now at this point I guess Las Vegas is looking for that championship. And so it is just a film that kind of ends on, I think, if the film wasn't well made and didn't have that Aaron Sorkin kind of dialogue and didn't have, so much going for it, you could see this and it gets to the end and all of a sudden the good guys lose, right? And you'd feel like, oh, well, that was just kind of a waste of a story. But instead, you realize that this was a more so like a movie about a sports team. It was more so a movie about the people running the team and the people behind the scenes, and it was their story, and they got kind of resolution, and they fell in love with the game again. Moneyball is just one of those films that I love it so much, and it makes me not necessarily always emotional, like I'm going to cry every time I watch it, but emotional towards the end, and I'm happy every time I watch it. It puts me in a good mood. One of my favorite comfort movies is Moneyball, and I love it so much. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below in the comments what some of your favorite sports movies of all time are, and if there's any of these that you agree or disagree with. And again, apologies for getting this out so late into the month. The plan is in the next probably 2 days or so, I'm going to post the preview video for the month of April, which we're already over halfway through, essentially. But I've already been watching some of the videos that are in that genre, so I've already got a good kind of momentum on it. And then in kind of the first week or so of May, it's when we'll post the results video for the April theme. But I'm excited to just kind of get back into a rhythm with this series. So again, let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comments, and if you'd like to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future videos in this or any of my other series on the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. And have a great day.